Hey everyone, it is May 9th and I am just giving you another video. I have been studying out of the book of Luke. I was in Luke chapter 8. I have enjoyed really taking my time with these stories. Luke 8 has a story, really a story within a story that has been really speaking to me lately, and I wanted to bring some points out of it. I really need a haircut, man, it is getting pretty bad. That'll be the first thing I do whenever we open back up. Anyway, Luke chapter 8, you have that story of the bleeding woman. Luke 8, Matthew 8, and Mark 5. The outer story, you have Jairus coming to Jesus to heal his daughter, and by the time Jesus gets there, she's dead, and Jesus raises her. But on the way to that, you have a story within a story. You have the bleeding woman coming to Jesus. And I just I've been reading this, and her attitude and her faith in Jesus' power has really been speaking to me lately, and hopefully it'll speak to you too. You know, on the way to raise Jairus' daughter, Jesus seems to be traveling in a crowd. And in this crowd, there's this woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. And this kind of illness could be, cured or treated today easily. But back then, it would affect every part of your life. I mean, you just try to imagine being affected by that, bleeding every day for 12 years. And in the nation of Israel, by God's law, every woman that was bleeding would be considered unclean, right? And so she was constantly considered unclean, meaning other people would try to avoid physical contact with her. So she would rarely get touched. And not only that, the social isolation from this. And some translations include a phrase, she spent all her money on doctors, and obviously it was to no avail. And so kind of putting yourself in her shoes, she's constantly being avoided. She's broke. She's been like this for 12 years. I'd imagine her emotional state would be very bad. To go through all this and have to deal with the isolation. But then she hears about Jesus, right? The Jesus who has been healing all sorts of people and all sorts of illnesses. And maybe there's this glimmer of hope, this possibility that Jesus could heal her, a man who has been healing others. And so she thought that she could go to him and be healed. But the way she does it is what's very, very unique. It's super admirable, right? Matthew 9:21. Matthew includes a verse where he mentions what she's thinking, what she says to herself in the midst of this. Matthew 9:21 says, she said to herself, "If I only touch his garment, I will be made well. If I just touch his garment, I'll be healed." That's what she's thinking when she does this. In her mind, Jesus doesn't even need to know. In her mind, she didn't need to ask Jesus. Jesus doesn't have to say it to be so. Maybe she thought she was unworthy to ask. I don't know what's going through her head, but she thinks as long as she touches him, it's all fine. She doesn't even need to do more than that. I mean, her thoughts about how powerful Jesus is phenomenal. There are so many stories where Jesus healed people, right? So it's filled in the Gospels are filled with stories where people coming to Jesus asking for healing. But this one stands out, right? She didn't even ask. She just thought, if I just touch him, I'll be healed. She believed Jesus was that powerful, right? I mean, it says a lot about Jesus' power when you come to him and ask for healing. But for her, I think it's even a step further. She thought if she just touched him, she would be healed. In her mind, the power of Jesus is overflowing, spilling out onto anyone he touches. And she was right. See, Jesus' garment, it healed her. The power wasn't in his robe, of course. The power was in Jesus. And I don't even want to pretend to know that I understand everything going on here. I mean, it's kind of crazy because she touched Jesus' robe and it healed her, Meaning Jesus' power was included her robe, and it happened involuntarily. Jesus healed her without meaning to heal her. And then he felt the power go out of him. How does that work? Jesus feels it whenever he heals someone, and he heals someone without even thinking about it? I wish I knew more about that, but of course, God didn't explain that so much. It's kind of cool. But the point is, right? The point is that Jesus' power is overflowing onto those who make contact with him. Jesus' power, separating from this, Jesus' power isn't just focused on physical ailments, right? Its primary purpose, its overflowing power's primary purpose, is that sickness we call sin and death. And I think we need to think like this woman in 3 ways. Number 1, we are sick. She knew she was sick. It was blatantly obvious. But to us, our symptoms aren't as obvious. We think our symptoms are just part of us. We forget that sin is a sickness, and sin has a 100% fatality rate, resulting in death, which is separation from God. And as emotionally devastating it must have been to have an illness for 12 years, I think we forget how emotionally devastating it should be to realize we sinned, to realize the consequences of our sin. If you ever think that sin isn't that bad, just remember what it did. Sin set Jesus to the cross. Number 2, Jesus' power is overflowing. She thought that if she even touched his garment, she would be healed. Forgiving our sins requires an amount of power that is unheard of, right? I mean, nothing on this planet could ever do it. But for Jesus' power, it's overflowing. This overflowing power to heal is very little to him. To forgive, he's able to do it. Jesus commends her faith at the end of this because, she had so much faith in what? Faith in his power to heal. She believed he could heal. And so the question is, do we believe he can forgive? Do we believe he can heal spiritually? And 3, if we are in contact with Jesus, we are healed. And I think that's really the point, isn't this? We need his power. His power is overflowing, so we need to come to him. She came to him physically, but we need to come to him through our faith, so that Jesus says to us, your faith has healed you. The journey that this woman takes, right? I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of this woman. This woman went through a journey that should be very similar to us disciples. She understood she was sick. She understood she was unclean. She understood the power of Jesus, that it was overflowing, and had faith that it would heal her. She came to Jesus, and by faith she was healed. And that's the kind of journey that we need to undergo, right? Realizing we're sick, understanding Jesus has the power to heal, and just being in contact with Jesus will heal us, and then coming to Jesus with faith. That's the journey of a disciple. That's the journey we Christians should take. Every person should take. That kind of awareness, that kind of faith is something we as disciples should all emulate. Lord, help us to understand how horrible sin is. Help us to understand how powerful Jesus is. And help us to come to you so that we may be forgiven by our faith. Amen.